Welcome to AppSynergy, the fastest way to build powerful custom business applications in the cloud. After you create your trial account, this is the screen you'll be presented with. Your account name defaults to a portion of the email address you used to create your trial account. Let's begin by changing it to something that's more appropriate. Let's click Account Settings, and let's change this to AppSynergy Tutorials. Your account consists of a core database with one or more applications on top of that database. We have no apps yet, so let's create one. When you create your first application, you will see a screen like this. The area to the left is the palette. This area will contain your database tables after we create them. And this white area here is your application canvas where we'll be building the user interface for your application. Let's begin by naming this application and roughing out some of its features. So we'll call this application AppSynergy Tutorial 1. Most applications start out with their core structure consisting of a set of tabs and an icon and a header at the top. So let's begin like that. We're going to drag off a tabs object and place it in the application canvas, resize it to fill the screen, and then we're going to drag off an icon object and put it in the header, and we are going to set an icon for this and resize it as appropriate. And let's maybe put some text next to it saying my first app. And maybe we want this font to be a little bit bigger, so we make it 18 point, resize it, maybe make it bold, etc. Okay, next, maybe underneath here, maybe the second tab is going to be something like reports, and there might be several database reports underneath there. And so we're going to drag a menu object and put it inside of the tabs object. And now we can have report 1, 2, 3. We'll rename this later. And on the first tab, let's call this one Customers. Next, let's create a couple of tables in our database. Come up to the palette, click the plus sign. You can create different types of database objects, database tables, database views, and federated tables, which will be covered in a later video. Right now, we're just going to create a regular database table. And since most databases have something to do with customers, let's call this one Customers for this table. And it's going to have a primary key, which is the unique identifier for the rows, called Customer ID, and this is going to be automatically generated. Let's just add a few common names. Company name, address, city, state. Let's make state only 2 characters long, so it's an abbreviation, and maybe zip code, which will be character 10. We'll get into the other data types available for the columns later. There's a bunch of data types, including things like documents, images, and signatures. Let's also make the company name required so we don't end up with any customers that don't have names. Click Create Table. Table is created, and you can see it now on the palette with its column names underneath here. Let's also create a table called Products to hold our product information. And it's going to have a product name. We'll just call it name because it's part of the products table. And it's going to have a price, which we are going to set this as a currency. And maybe also has a picture of the product. Call it photo, and we'll change its type to image and create table. Next, let's create an orders table that is linked to the customers table. So let's call the table orders. And then we're going to add a column called customer ID. And we're going to make sure that this data type is auto key so it can be linked. And we're going to link this to the customers table customer ID column. So we have customer ID in this column is linked to the customer ID column in there too. You always link to the primary key of another table. So in the order, we're also going to have something like order date And we should make this a date field. And maybe we'll have order total. And we'll make this a currency. And maybe we'll add another column just to show another data type. We'll call this one status. And we're going to change its type to a drop-down. And there can be, let's say, a few options. It's a new order, it's in process, or it's shipped. Okay, click Create Table. Finally, we're going to create an order lines table that is linked to both the orders table and the products table. So we're going to have one line on the order for each of the things that the person has ordered. So let's create a new table. We're going to call this one order lines. And we're going to add a column. We're going to call this order ID. And it's going to be an auto key, and it's going to be linked to orders order ID. And then next we're going to add another one called product ID. It's also going to be an auto key, and it's going to be linked to the products table that we created before, product ID. And an order that's not tied to an order and doesn't have a product, it doesn't make any sense. So we're going to make both of those fields required. We're also going to add a quantity field, so we can say how much the person ordered of this type of product, and we're going to make this an integer, and we're going to also make that required. And then we're going to add a column, and we're going to call this one line total. This will be the total of the line quantity times the price. And you notice the price is not in this table. We'll pull it from the other table. We can build the application. Line total, and we'll make the data type currency. So the quantity is an integer, and the line total is a currency. And that will have to be required as well. And click Create Table. Okay, let's begin by building some basic user interface to add customers to the application. So to do that, we're going to select the customers table and drag off a report object. Report objects are used for reports, as you'll see in later videos, but they're also used as simple data selection widgets. So in this case, that's all it's going to be. We don't want these other columns to the right, so we're going to say remove all columns to the right. We're just going to leave the customer ID and the company name. And then we're going to add another object. So we're going to use the same table, the customers table, and this time we're going to add a record object to the right of it to allow us to add, edit, etc. And then we want, when we click on one of the rows here, we want it to pull up the associated records. So we're going to create a data link between the two. So we'll correct data link, and then double click on this object, and you can see we're going to link them by customer ID. Okay, so that'll be, so when we click on one here, it will show up here. Next, let's add a header box above the customer record, and let's make it the same width. And let's add a couple buttons to it. So inside here, we're going to add a button. Let's call it Add, to add a record. And we're going to give it an icon and move it around a little bit. And then let's add another button called Save. And let's give it an icon and say Save. And then we have to hook these buttons up. So let's hook this one up first. We're going to say Button Actions by clicking on the toolbar. We're going to connect it up to this record object. And we're going to say Add Individual Record. And then we're going to come over to Save, and same thing, Button Actions, and we're going to connect it to the same record object, but here we are going to say Save. So now let's add some data so we can play with this application a little bit. So we're going to click Test App. And we are going to add a new record, and we're going to call this one Company 1, and we're going to save it, and then we're going to add another one called Company 2, and we're going to save it. Okay, nothing is showing here, but if we refresh this, you'll see that our customers show up there. So now as we click between them, we have our different records, and that's our basic customer screen. Now let's go back and add some basic searching capability. Let's begin by also putting a header box above this report widget, and let's make it the same size. Now we're going to add a virtual field to the header box to use as a search box. We're going to make this a character field so we can type anything we want into it. I'm going to reposition it. Then we're going to call this block quick search. Okay, so we have a virtual field. Virtual field just means it's not a field represented in the database. It's just a field on screen. And then we are going to put a button next to it, and we're going to make this a search button. So we can put a little search icon next to it. So all data widgets have filters. So you can click on the report widget and click filters. You could create a new filter. Let's call this one quick search. And then down here you have the fields for the filter. So let's make this a match any filter, and we want to have it where the customer ID equals, now we can use a formula here. If you want to know how formulas work, you can click the help button here and it'll give you a lot of syntax examples. What we're going to do is we're going to say at value of the virtual field called quick search. That was the name we just gave it. So if the customer ID equals whatever we type into here, it will be a match. We can add another parameter, which is maybe the company name. Let's say begins with the same thing. So it match any of the following. If the ID equals the number typed in, or if the company name begins with that, then it will be a match. Next, we are going to take this search icon that we added, this search button, and we're going to connect it to the report widget. So we're going to connect it to the report widget, and then down here we're going to say apply filter quick search. So when we click this button, it's going to run this filter, and this filter looks at the value that the user types into this field. Okay, let's add some data so we have something to work with. And we have company 1, company 2, Acme, and test. If we came over here and we say, I don't know, ACM, and then click the search button, because we did begins with, it pulls it up. Now we'll create another screen just like this for the products table. We won't bore you with this. We'll just show you the basics. We come here, add a tab, call this tab products, and it's exactly the same process. Okay, so we've created our products tab that looks a lot like our customers tab, but it's displaying products. We can test this. We've already added some data for playing around purposes. Now let's go back and build a more complex screen to show off some of the more powerful features of AppSynergy. Here we're going to add an order screen. So we're going to select the tabs and we're going to add a tab. We're going to call this tab orders. And maybe we're going to make orders the actual first tab. We're going to start out by having a list of customers at the top, quite similar to the other screen. We're going to add a list of the customer's orders underneath it. So we're going to select the customer and see their orders. So we added a report widget for the orders table. We're going to data link between the customer and the order. And because we set up those primary and foreign keys between the tables, it sees that the customer ID in the customers field links to the customer ID in the orders table. So that's all we need to do. Next, we're going to drag off an orders record over here to the right, and we're going to make this bigger because we're going to do some extra stuff in here. And we're going to data link from the list of orders to the order record, and it knows to link them by order ID. And we are later going to drop some other records inside of this to create the relationships between the tables in the user interface. So this customer ID field is in the orders table, and if you remember, it was a foreign key field, which means that it links to the customer table. Since it knows that, it automatically generates a pick list. You can customize this, add and remove columns, etc. And so now maybe what we want to do is let's move this over here, and let's grab a customer record and drop it inside of this order record. So it's going to be nested inside of it. And we're going to make it a little bit smaller so that it fits. And so maybe we'll rearrange the fields so they look something like this. And maybe we want this whole child record, which is the customer record, maybe we want that read-only, so it'll just display the information. Okay, so to continue on here, we added a header with some add and save buttons as before. But we want a list of the items in the order. So let's move this order total to the lower right. And let's grab the order lines record and drag it and put it over here. and we're going to delete the fields or hide them actually that we don't want. This is the order ID, which will automatically be linked to the order ID in the parent table. The product ID and so forth, we're going to put in a header. We're just going to rearrange this here. We're going to put the quantity field here, and we're going to put the line total at the end. So now we want to put a header above here. So we've got an order on the outer record, a customer that's linked to it here. These order lines are linked to their parent by the order ID. And then on the order line, it's linked to the products table, which again automatically has a pick list that's showing here that's automatically been created. You can customize it however you like. So let's see what happens. This is incomplete, but let's see what happens if we try to use it at this stage. We're going to hit test application. And so we're going to come up here and we're going to say, we're going to add a new order. And here we've got the pick list. We're going to pick the customer. So say we want Acme. It's going to fill in their information. Order date, let's say it's today, and status, let's say it's new. So we probably want the order date to default to today, the status to default to new, and obviously we need a way to add some lines here. So let's go back and do that. So let's add a formula so that the order date defaults to the date that the record was created. So here we have order date, we selected it, I click calculate. This either can be continuously calculated or just a default value when the record was created. And we can use a formula that just says at today. Again, click the help button to get details in the formula syntax, what the functions are, etc. Click OK. And this will automatically default when the record's created to the date that it was created. Same thing with status. One of our options was new. And so we can come up here and it's a string, and so we have to put it in quotes, and so we say the word new. Now, when we test the application and we go to create a new record, you'll see that it automatically defaults to today's date and the status. Continuing on, we need a way to be able to add detail lines at the bottom. So I'm going to put a header box inside of this record and above here, and then I'm going to rearrange it and add buttons. So picking up, I added some text inside this box by just dragging some text off of here and editing it and moving it around. And I added a button here so we could add detail lines. So I'm going to connect this button to the child record here. So instead of we could connect it in theory to any of the dotted dash red lines, but we're going to connect it down here to this order lines table that we dropped in. And here we're going to say add record at end. So there's going to be a list of records and we're going to add another one. So that allows us to add a detail line, but the problem with this is when we go to run it, what you'll quickly find is that you don't see what you want to see. So if we add a new record here, this defaults in, we can pick the customer, say it's Acme, and we can pick it, we can add a line, and then we can come up here and say we want some fishing hooks, and maybe we want 5 of them. Well, there's a couple things wrong here. First of all, you don't see the product description and the price, and you would want a line total and an order total calculated automatically. So let's go back and do that. The first thing we want to do is we're going to nest yet another level of deep. So we've got order record here with a customer record inside of it, and then inside the order record, kind of as a peer to the customer record, we've got the order line record. We're going to now put the products record inside of the order line record, and then it'll be linked together. So I'm going to rearrange these fields. I'm going to delete the ones I don't want, or hide them rather, and what I want is the product name and the price, and the rest of these I'm going to hide or delete for now so that they're not here. So now if you were to look behind the scenes, if you clicked this order line record and you looked at its data links, one was already created between order lines product ID and products product ID. That's because of the links we set up when we established the tables in the database. So we automatically get a pick list and it automatically knows that this is a child record. If we want to make this read-only, we can just say make read-only. We're going to test this so you can see incrementally what's going on. And you'll see here when we add a record here and we add a line, when we choose a product like a sinker, it now pulls up dynamically the sinker description and the price. This works exactly the same way, even though it's nested deeper, as picking the customer up here. Then we can add in a quantity like 5. So what we really want it to do is we want these fields to be read-only next, and we want these values to calculate automatically, both across And then as we add more records going down, let's do one here. Let's add another one that is a hook, and let's say we want 10 of these, right? So we really want this to calculate across and down. Let's go back and add the formulas. So the first one we're going to do here is going to create a calculation formula on the line total. It's not going to be a default value. It's going to be constantly recalculated. It's going to be read-only. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the value of the order line's quantity and we're going to multiply it by, and it's a child record, so it has to be the first record of the product's price. So here we have basically quantity times price. This is the value on the same record, and this is the child record, so it has to be first value. Now here, this is in the outer record. So this is at this order total field is the order total for the orders record, but these are in a different table, the order lines. So the way you reference them, we're going to create a formula. It's calculated. It's going to be a read-only field. And we're going to say, give us the sum of the order lines line total. So here, sum of order lines line total. And that's it. Okay, so let's test this. We're getting close to a real application. So let's create a record, and let's go ahead and make it Acme again. And so we've got the order date defaults, the calculated status defaults to new. We picked customer there for Acme. It showed up. Then we come down here and we say he wants some hooks, and let's just do 5, and then 5 times $8.99 is $44.95, which is the order total. And then when we add new lines in here, we come up here and maybe he wants a sinker and he wants 10 of these, and 10 times $1.25 is $12.50, so it's calculating across and down. So there we go. We hit save. That record is in the database. So now if we click on Acme down here, it pulls up Acme the company, and then it shows the related orders. There's only one. And then when we click on the particular order, it shows the full order detail. That's it for this AppSynergy tutorial video. Please be sure to check out all the other tutorial videos available on our website.